Okay, hello everyone, and let's get back to King's Gambit series. I believe 2.5, 3 years ago I started making like a bunch of videos for White against King's Gambit, and then all of a sudden I stopped because I've completed with 7 videos, and I just had to finish the whole King's Gambit chapter with the d5 Falkbeer Countergambit, and another one was e takes f4, second move by black. Well, finally, thanks to Nepomniachtchi, I am about to finish the King's Gambit series. Why did I bring his name here? Because Nepo made a fantastic course about the King's Gambit, and he's been using the King's Gambit with white pieces for the last 2 or 3 years extensively, especially in Title Tuesdays, but in all of his active time controls, mainly in blitz games, in rapid, and he's beating nearly everyone. Okay, he's one of the top and the leading world players, and he's so strong, one might say it's not because of the King's Gambit, but he certainly wouldn't be able winning so many games unless the opening is good itself. Well, just like I said, thanks to his games, thanks to his examples, thanks to some of the analysis that I now just even improved throughout the years, I'm just going to give you, and I'm just going to present you how to play against the Falkbeer Countergambit. Let's go. It's f4, and after d5, we have the Falkbeer Countergambit. There is nothing better but to take the pawn on d5. And now we have to check 4 different moves. The worst one is queen takes d5. I believe that nobody who plays d5 shouldn't capture by queen, because capturing by queen, he would bring the queen out early into the game, and this would be one artificial way of playing the bad Scandinavian after knight c3, because we're not just harassing this queen with tempo. And I believe that the pawn on f4 could just help us because we're going to take on e5, play knight f3, bishop e2, and do short castle fast, in which case we can take advantage of 2 things. First of all, we have the open f-file, and the rook is on f-file. And second thing, we're going to be able to break in the center with d4 and to absolutely get a good control of the center. So after like knight c3, black has following possibilities. For example, I very much like all those games that ended up in just one move, queen d8. Hopefully, in most of these games for black, f takes c5 wasn't working because of queen h4, queen e4. Well, I immediately have a very good news for you. Those who go with queen d8, you just take on e5, and they don't have queen h4 and queen e4. Don't worry about that, and then you can easily play g3. You won the central pawn, you're up a pawn, and you should be easily winning afterwards. What's missing? Queen e4, thanks to the knight on c3 and that tempo that we earned when the queen came to d5. Another thing is queen a5. I would call it King's Gambit, Falkbeer Countergambit, Scandinavian stupid defense. Simply queen a5 is nothing here. We just played knight f3, going after the central pawn. Yes, we do want to take it by knight or by pawn. They will go and take it like this, and then you play d4. We would like to capture an f4, and they just have to go with bishop d6 to defend this pawn. That's a normal and somehow, in my opinion, one very logical attempt of defending the pawn on f4. We play bishop d3, we go short castle, and thanks to next move, what is so much better? Boom, knight b5. Knight b5 goes after the bishop on d6. We would like to either take on d6 and to take the pawn on f4, or maybe, if they move the bishop, to go with bishop f4 with further pressure on the c7 square, pawn on f4, and on the dark squares in the black's game. So just like you see in all these positions, we just have a very lovely game and a very lovely position, and white is just so much better. So they have to go queen e6. Majority of these games that by the way, let me just show you one more thing. I played a blitz game. He takes d4, and my opponent went for the bishop before. He indirectly, like defended the pawn on f4. I'm saying defended. And I was wondering, I'm playing the king's gambit. Why should I care about the material and the pawns? So I said, okay, let me just go with the bishop f4. I'm not claiming this is the best move, but I like it. My opponent, after bishop f4, captured on c3, played queen takes c3. I played bishop d2, and somehow I'm enjoying my position. I do have a bishop pair. He has to move his queen on a3 or just c6, doesn't matter. And no matter what you play, I'm just going to do bishop d3 followed by short castle and in a razor attack thanks to the open e and f files and thanks to the bishop pair and thanks to the potentially strong center with c4 d5. I won this game relatively easy. The thing is, they have to go with, they mainly go with queen e6, threatening to take on f4. You take, and now you're forcing this queen to take. On your question, could we play like this when they moved the queen on a5? Yes, we could. Yes, we could. You could have taken and once again reached this position. So you don't have to necessarily play knight f3 here. So after knight c3, queen e6, you capture. He captures bishop e2. Reminds me of the Scandinavian modern defense when they play queen e5 check. And here, after like bishop e2, if they go bishop g4, you harass the queen. They take, you take, queen h5, and you play bishop f4. No, you're not winning materially, but speaking of your development and everything in this position, we just have to very much prefer white's game. Why? You have one developed piece, second developed piece, third developed piece. You're going to play castle. Your king will be in safety. This king is exposed. Queen is in the middle of nowhere. You have like, and on top of all that, these two files would be open and this would be great game. So they have to go with knight c6, knight f3, queen a5, d4, knight f6, and I like bishop d2, avoiding and threatening some knight b5 followed by c4, knight b5 followed by a4. Reminds me on an improved version against the Scandinavian defense. That's enough with queen d5. That's the weakest move. Time to check Nimzovich-Marshall counter, Gambit c6. For so many years, I was teaching my students who used to play against the King's Gambit Falkbeer counter Gambit, and I used to teach them this Nimzovich-Marshall counter Gambit because my philosophy when I was younger, coach, was if they play King's Gambit against you, counter them with a counter Gambit, and we'll see what's gonna happen. And it's very interesting. Here, I would like to show you a couple of variations. First of all, Nepo in his last two blitz games played 92, a move that I would never even consider seriously here, but it makes sense. First of all, on bishop g4, he can chase away that bishop, and you can't play ever queen h4 because of g3. While in the case of, for example, c takes d5, you can easily take like this, and when they play queen h4, you once again have a way to take on e5 and to cover yourself by knight because they don't have the queen e4. It's relatively interesting. So let me just show you two games of Nepo. He played against Garev and Oleksienko. Both of these games were in 2023. So knight c6, he played knight c3. By the way, they can't take on e5 because queen e2 would just win the piece, and that's absolutely bad for black. So after knight h6, I believe it's one of the best ideas here. It's one of the best ideas here, and I was analyzing this position. If they could put a knight on the edge of the board, I believe we can go with queen h5 and go with, of course, it's not the only move to go like this, exchanging the queens. And this is another thing that I wanted to tell you. Unlike traditional approach of the King's Indian, like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, when everything was, you know, like what was played by white. White were just walking on a thin ice. It's not a case anymore. Nowadays, according to modern engines, many of these endgames are just favorable for white. Okay, specifically talking about this one, maybe it's just a tiny bit better for white because of IQP on d5. But in general, I just want to tell you that new approaches of the King's Indian and by white against the King's, I mean, with the King's Indian against the black pieces, in many of these lines, white just ends up with preferable endgames. That's very interesting, and that's something that you have to keep in mind. Let me just show you what happened here. He came up with 92, and his opponents went with some sort of Stoneton counter gambit with e4. They just want to take on d5 and build a good center. And now Nepo goes in a very nice style of the King's Gambit and plays d3. After e takes, queen takes. And now you have a possibility to take on d5. Oleksienko, strong GM from Ukraine, captured by queen. Nepo captured. Played knight bc3 and bishop e3. There we go. This is what I wanted to discuss with you. Traditional approach of the King's Indian, let's sacrifice knight, rook, queen, and checkmate our opponent. Nowadays, it's not anymore like this. This is a modern approach, and I have to call it Nepo approach with the King's Gambit, and it works perfectly fine for white. Take a look at this one. He's got 1, 2, 3 pawn islands. He's got a very weak IQP. You have a blockade of that pawn. You're going to play long castle. And if I have to give an assessment here, what is much better? Easily much better. Of course, Nepo won the game. And another thing, okay, Maya, but we don't want to play like this. We play the counter gambit. Let's actually carry on in counter gambit style. But yeah, I don't mind. Let's go. Nepo played knight bc3 against Garev. Garev, very original and strong player from the United States. Bishop e3, castles, long castles, rook e8. Says, okay, time to commit yourself. Let's go. Decide whether you want to take or move it. Step back. The guy goes bishop f8. Nepo captures. Once again, we get a position where the queens are going, simply queens are about to be exchanged. So queen d3, rook d3. Of course, you can't play bishop f5 because c takes b7, and that would be winning. Plays knight c6, and what is this? Nepo, without a queens, prevents bishop f5. He's up a queen. He completes. He's up a pawn. He completes his development, and there is no a single tactical counter-attacking chance thanks to the pawn on a3, thanks to the knight on g3. No more bishop f5. No knight b4. White is just so much better, and Nepo won against Garev as well. This very interesting approach by Nepo with 92 is something to consider. It's not the only one. You can play queen e2, and by the way, that's a legendary approach by all these guys from the past. I just want to tell you about this one. If they play e4, challenge that with d3, and after this, play d takes, knight c3, f5, and bishop d2 followed by long castle. That's a very nice approach. You want to play knight h3, bishop e3 with much better game for white. Another thing was knight f6, if queen e2. You take, they take by knight, knight f3, and you just keep on developing. You have a good, I would say, improved version of the Vienna defense thanks to the open file. And finally, if they take on d5, you take on e5, you're up a pawn. They go with bishop c5 to stop d4 at all costs and to stop queen f2 because you just need to complete development. You go c3 to play d4. They go like this, b4, chase it away, play knight a3 to go with this, and at some point to go after the d4, knight c4, castles, and white is just so much better. If you want to try out something new, that's my point about this position. If you want to try out something new, go with knight e2, Nepo's approach with knight e2. If you would like to go with, if you want to go and try out absolutely, let's call it like modern top-notch thing, go with knight e2. But if you want to go with classic approach that is also good, I just showed you queen e2, briefly showed you and just gave you the ideas. So play like this, and you're about to play queen f2, and the main line goes with bishop g4. You play queen f2, they capture, and I don't want to go now deeper than this. It's fine, and I found even some King's Gambit correspondence tournaments where white players went for this line. This is a clearly better line for you. He's playing with 3 pawn islands. He's playing clearly with weak pawn on d5, IQP. You have the bishop here. You have a file open of, okay, you can't immediately take advantage of it, but at some point you'll be able to do it. For example, I remember playing one bullet game. My opponent played very, how should I say, tempting and intuitive knight d4. He just wants to go for cheap, queen or knight c2. And I played queen f4. That's the only thing that I remembered that he couldn't take, because then I have bishop b5. And just like you see, then my opponent brought the knight back on c6. I played d4. I was up a pawn and won easily. So the thing is, in this position, for example, knight g7 was in all those correspondence games. c3, if you manage to connect your pawns, he's dead. There was one correspondence game. The guy played knight g6, d4. Should we analyze anything like this? You got a strong pawn chain, you're up a pawn, you have the bishop here, you have an open f file, he's got a weak pawn on d5. Buddy, I don't want to play just like this. I mean, I do, but you shouldn't. So after d4, you just go with knight a3, knight g6, and here they're about to get a pawn back, and they did not allow us to play d4. And everything looks so cool for black, but now I believe e6 is a move that can give us a certain amount of initiative. After f takes e6, first of all, we once again broke these pawns. Second thing, we're just breaking the position of the king on e8, bishop b5, going after the knight, and also securing the castle. And somehow, maybe Engine would say it's slightly better for white, unclear, but I certainly would prefer white pieces here, thanks to this bishop pair, open f-file, inability to play easily short castle, and I just prefer white's game. So, just like you see, I showed you all this stuff against Nimzovich-Marshall Countergambit, and it should be enough. It should be enough. You're gonna give me your feedback on these lines. Do you like it or not? What would you add? And sometimes I keep getting comments, you didn't give us that line, you didn't give us this line. Buddy, don't get me wrong. I'm here because of you. I'm here to show you some interesting stuff. But for example, there was a guy who sent me a message recently, or made a comment here on the channel. You didn't give all the best lines. First of all, it's my choice. What am I going to give? Second thing, I just have to tell you that sometimes it's way better to give you a plan, a right and good and easygoing plan that all the students are going to follow, and that way they're just going to be able to attack very, you know, like if you remember one line and if you simply learn the moves by heart, you're going to know them for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, but eventually you're going to forget them. If you learn the plans, then you know how to attack in different kinds of positions, in same structures, and you will remember forever. And that's why I believe it's way more important to give you plans than to boost you with the most important and, you know, like lines like this. If you want that, go and get some articles or buy some courses. Anyways, after like it takes f4, it's called modern transfer variation of this Falkbeer Countergambit. It's a very common move, and I just have to show you what's happening here. When they take on f4, we just have to play knight f3. We just have to play knight f3, we just have to get a center, we just have to prevent queen h4, we have to complete development, and I'd like to go with d4, getting the pawn on f4 eventually. And now, black has a couple of moves. First of all, queen d5. Queen d5 is nothing scary, because we just go with knight c3, with tempo harass this queen. And when the queen goes back to d8, we go d4. We want to, once again, with tempo, by developing in the center, get the pawn on f4. They have to go with bishop d6 to defend the pawn. Makes no sense if they play knight f6. You just go with bishop f4, bishop d3, and I don't see a single problem. Put the king on h1 and mate them after bishop g5. Queen e1, queen h4, for example. So, bishop d6 to defend the pawn. Makes sense. Makes sense, and now requires a very a specific approach by white. For example, all these, I would call them a legendary, but at the same time traditional King's Gambit players would play, I don't know, bishop c4, bishop d3, short castle, would go with some g3, they would start sacking, and if it works, works. If they play like, I'm talking about from black's point of view, if they play like engines, then something is wrong. Well, something is wrong because you're not following the latest approaches and improvements about the King's Gambit. And believe it or not, I found bishop c4, which is a very logical thing. You want to play short castle, and it seemed against knight e7. You just play knight g5, threatening on f7, and when they play castles, queen h5, end of the game. So they have to go with bishop g4. You go castles, they go knight f6. You immediately go with queen e7 check, unpinning yourself, going after the king, forcing to f8. And this is one of those moments that I spoke about in the beginning of this lecture. New approaches, especially thanks to Nepo and to these engine analysis, say that many of these King's Gambit analysis can easily be played, and these positions can be played like this if the queens are off the board. I know it's against the spirit of the King's Indian player, but you know what? If you want to play like the chess in the 21st century, you simply have to follow the engine analysis. Because you may pretend they don't exist, it's not good for chess or whatever, but your opponent won't pretend. And he's going to look at the analysis, he's going to learn the lines, and then what's going to happen? You're going to lose the game. So that's why here, knight g5, for example, it's very obvious that the pawn on f4 is about to fall, and f7 is under the attack. And you know what? What is much better? Once again, without the queens. That's very weird. Also, you know me. Most of these lines are checked by the engines. So I'm not going to give you some very suspicious or some dubious lines. Check out these on the computers. You'll see that most of these things that I give you are always, you know, like top-notch things in terms of theoretical approach. And they're very strong in terms of the engine approach. So after knight f6, we've seen what happens if bishop g4 and knight e7. Okay, knight e7 gives you typical tactics after knight g5. But what's happening after knight f6? The guy just wants to play castle. And he just wants to play normal. For the time being, we can't take on f4. Believe it or not, boom, queen e2 again. And once again, we're hoping by exchanging the queens to get much better position, castle, and that knight b5. You're about to win the bishop. When you win the bishop, you're going to win the bishop pair. When you win the bishop pair, the game is open. It means your bishops are going to be strong, position active, and eventually you're going to be able to capture the pawn on f4. You're going to get the pawn back with preferable middle game. Crazy. Yeah, but this is the way it is. And I would like to stop showing you all this stuff. Here with the queen d5, I just showed you how to play these kinds of things, so it's the time for the next line. Enough with the queen d5, where we have queen d5, queen d8. Let me just show you queen e6. Here, bishop e2, bishop d6 to defend the pawn, d4 as usual. And when they go like this, this knight g5 does a good job. It's not about that we want to take the pawn back on f4 just like that. We're just harassing this queen with tempo and playing knight c on e4. Knight c on e4 is an important move to once again get rid of that bishop to be able to capture the pawn eventually on f4. After knight bc6, I found so many games with knight d6, c3, and compensation. But my new approach and the novelty would be d5. Why? You're kicking the knight away. You're not satisfying yourself simply with the fact that, okay, I'm going to win the bishop pair and eventually somehow I'll be able to get a pawn back on f4. Because if you get a pawn back on f4 eventually, you probably have to give up the bishop and then you will lose the bishop pair. So d5, c4, you're fighting with a strong center, and now you clearly want to take on d6 and take on f4. Knight g6, he's defending now this way the pawn on f4, clever. Knight d6, c takes d6, and knight e4. I just have to tell you that in position where you have problems with a broken pawn structure, where I have bishop here, where I can kick the knight away and play a3 before maybe some, I don't know, rook a2, artificial way of developing the rook, maybe g3 to get a pawn back. I definitely prefer white's game here. d6 is hanging, you gotta take care of that. You can't move the knight from g6. If you can't move the knight from g6, your queen on h6 is kind of on the edge of the board and it's doing nothing. If you just tie up your pieces, queen on h6 and the knight on g6 to defend that pawn, and all the time to just go and defend the pawn on f4 with these pieces, and on the contrary, not doing anything, something is wrong about your approach. Something is wrong about your game. And finally, I just have to show you so knight c3, queen e6, bishop e2, and for example, knight f6. It doesn't make much difference. We check the bishop d6, knight e7, knight f6, you just play like this. I mean, even if you play bishop d6, I'm gonna play d4. You're gonna play like this. I can consider knight b5 always. And I'm always gonna go after the bishop on d6, so I can go after the pawn on f4. Once I win the bishop on d6, I won the bishop pair. I'm happy. I'm a King's Gambit player. I'm also a King's Indian player. So what's so special about it? I like the bishop pair. I like the open games. I like the strong center. I like the open f5. I like the attack eventually out of position that I play on compensation there. So that's the way it is. And finally, if knight f3, they go with bishop d6. That's another approach, and I'm going to show you a game of Nepo against Alexenko. The game was played in Moscow, 2021. Nepo played e4. Alexenko sacrifices. Nepo says, okay, I don't care, I'm just going to keep on developing. And the guy plays knight f6. And now, you'll see something. Nepo knows his lines very well. He knows that lately all these endgames and queen exchanges are good for white, and goes with queen e2. This is a very interesting thing. And I'll be honest with you, preparing these lines for you and for this lecture, I wasn't familiar with all these aspects, new aspects of the King's Gambit, where queen exchanges and queen trades are so all of a sudden favorable for white. So this guy didn't even go for queen e7. Alexenko is 2700 player. He knows that if the queen exchanges would be good, that he should be going with this. He didn't go for this. Of course, he would go like this and carry on in the most normal fashion. I like bishop c4, getting the he just completes his development and wants to go castle, knight e or knight g5 afterwards. The guy played king f8. You know what? If you play king f8 to be able to defend the pawn on f4 at all costs and not to exchange queens, something is wrong. Something is off with his variations. Nepo played knight e5, jumping with the knight on e5 and going for the pawn on f4. C takes d5, bishop f4, and long castle. The guy played bishop g4, knight g4, bishop f4, king b1, knight g4, king g4, and Nepo went after the pawn. King was anyways weak and won the game very easily afterwards. 15 moves, and Nepo was completely winning against 2700 GM. Okay, it was a blitz game, but somehow, and I'm once again going to tell you, I checked these games, I checked these analysis with the engines. Most of these moves are almost absolutely the best by both sides. So just like you see, a very easy game by Nepo. Once again, that approach with d4, knight c3, and queen e2, and are very, very much like it. So modern variation after knight f3 simply has to be played with knight f6 by black. And that's simply the only approach. Bishop b5. Once again, Nepo thing. He played against Gukesh in 2023 in Croatia, in Zagreb. Played the following game. Gukesh played bishop d7. Best move is c6, but Gukesh played bishop d7. Nepo exchanged. If queen d7, then you have problems to develop your knight, so Gukesh developed knight, castles, and played knight takes d5. Currently, Gukesh is up a pawn. Nepo doesn't even have the bishop pair anymore. And position looks critical. But take a look at the following thing. Now Nepo said, okay, maybe I don't have the bishop pair anymore, but now I'm just going to go for the pawn, and I'm just going to go for the better development. So what happened? Nepo played c4, played d4, captured the pawn back, and played knight c3. And you know what? somehow with an open E and F files, with a strong control of the center, better developed pieces because they're just controlling center better, I prefer White's game. Eventually he won against Gukesh. I can show you a couple more moves. But I also want to tell you one more thing during today's lecture. Most of these analyses are based on Nepo's games, and of course in some moments I would either improve his games because he mainly played them in Blitz or Rapid, and he not, it's very logical, cannot play the best moves all the time, so sometimes I'm just analyzing by myself, with a couple of my students, or simply with the engines. But you cannot even imagine a better lecture file and the analysis to get, but to be able to get analysis by one of the best and the leading world players who play in such an attractive fashion this opening. He's winning all his games with King's Gambit. And by the way, one more thing. After this lesson and the next lesson, I'm just going to complete the whole King's Gambit, I would say, survey with these nine files. So you're going to be able to get a complete PGN with the 9 files. So that's going to also be a good thing about this one. Anyways, after c6, queen b3, developing rook to d1, Gukesh played knight b6, Nepo developed, played a4, jumped knight e5, king h1, king in safety, and broke with e5. Believe me, this is an extremely difficult game for Gukesh. The guy played knight c8, according to all good rule. Passed pawn should be blocked by the knight because it's the best blocking piece. Knight c4, knight b5, d6. He didn't allow that. He's not allowing d6. Sorry, knight d6, and eventually in just a couple moves from here, he won the game against Gukesh. Beautiful and seemingly very easy game. After bishop e5, c6 is the best. D takes, and knight c6. Here, I just had to analyze move that doesn't happen too often here. And I was surprised when I analyzed this. It looks stupid. It looks ugly a little bit because all these pawns are just completely broken. And instead of developing his knight with tempo, because we certainly don't want to take on c6 immediately, you play bishop c4, and after bishop d6, you once again go with queen e2. And you once again should satisfy yourself with an endgame that is going to happen in a classic fashion where they just have all these troublesome pawns and king on e7. And king f8, you have a very lovely b3, followed by knight c3, a long castle plan. Well, in the case of bishop e7, you play d4, you capture the pawn back, you put it on e5, go back here, you did it so he's going to have problems on the light squares, castles. An engine here showed me with an exclamation mark move for black. It was bishop a3. Well, I'm always happy, and I absolutely have no doubts that you guys as a King's Gambit players will enjoy the following position as well. I don't see anything that special about bishop a3. I would give up gladly queen for the rook and the bishop. We have the bishop pair, we have an open file, they have a broken pawn structure, we have pawn dark square bishop and the rook for the queen. But I definitely would prefer White's game here. So that's what I wanted to show you. That's why I believe they have to go with the knight c6. And now Nepo played knight c3. He played so many games in this position. I picked 4 of his game in this line. And by the way, all these games are extremely recent ones from 2022 to 2025. So absolutely believe in the analysis. After queen d6, by now you learned how important it is to give this check and offer them endgames. Bishop e6, knight d4. For example, this line is an interesting approach by black players to play some sort of counter gambit. If queen d7, you win the bishop pair, you play d4, bishop d2, and long castle. This is game between Nepo and Dominguez. After a6, he has to lose the bishop pair, but now he just relied on a healthier pawn structure. One guy, Mitusov, against him played knight e5, knight e4, and played king b1, followed by c4, followed by queen f3, slowly strengthening his game. Somehow if we have to look at the number of pawn islands, we have them less, 2 against 3. Somehow they can't easily play e5. If I play c4, I'm not only going to kick the knight away, but an e5 stop because of d5. So definitely white is better, and he eventually managed to win the game. Dominguez played b5, which makes sense, and where Dominguez just wants to play knight d5, in which case you won't have any longer knight e4 followed by c4. I mean, no more c4. So Nepo played knight e4, offering an endgame that is certainly better for white. Dominguez played queen d5, and after king b1, queen e4, he went into this endgame. I was wondering also what was happening when I checked this game for the first time. What would happen after this? Well, the same thing would happen. He would still play g3, and with his broken pawns, he would eventually win that. That's something similar that he played against Dominguez. I don't want to remind you how strong is Dominguez. He's one of the guys who's 20 years in the top 20 players of the world, extremely well theoretically prepared, always top-notch openings, and he's the guy to follow. So after d5, bishop c5, rook f1, Nepo played rook g5. You can't play. He tried to keep the pawns at all costs, played c3, played bishop h6, and eventually he won this game. Just like you see so many nice examples from Nepo's games, and that's why I believe this counter gambit with queen d7. Sorry, it's not a counter gambit. Counter gambit is with castle. It doesn't work. But this line because you're just playing position with dubious pawn structure. Maybe it's interesting when you go like this, but here he came up with very nice approach. Analyzing all his games from King's Gambit, I realized that he played a big number of games against Aravind Chidambaram. Chidambaram is also now 2700 GM, improving a lot, very nice, tactical, well-prepared theoretically. And they are always competing with some novelties in the King's Gambit. So let me just show you the next one. Nepo, of course, takes. Not taking only to win the bishop pair, because it's not about that. You're going to see that the very next move. It's about to break his pawn structure. So he captured, and boom, he now captured on c6. Chidambaram was about to jump on d4, but Nepo captures on c6. Don't tell me that you would be happy to play a game with all these pawns being broken like this. Nepo played b3. Take a look at the game against Bologan from the last year. Bologan played e5, played e4. Very dangerous that looks at first place. Playing castle, and for the first time he threatens to grab the pawn. Rook e8, check, rook h1. Buddy, position that looked so promising like few moves just before this moment, now looks almost terrible for black and almost hopeless. So after e3, he captured an e3, played queen e6, queen c6, and played knight b5. Boom. The bishop falling, and the guy resigned. 19 moves. So after like b3, Chidambaram played knight e5. He's defending and threatening some queen h4. Looks dangerous. Nepo plays bishop b2, and just when Chidambaram said, okay, finally I managed to crush his king, Nepo reacted in a classic King's Gambit style, g3. So when the guy played f takes, boom, long castle, put the king in safety, and now you're even having the attack. After knight f4, queen e1, queen g4, capturing, knight e4, knight f2, knight d3. I'm just going a little bit faster, sorry for that, so I can show you everything. Eventually, Chidambaram had to deal with all these pawns being broken, and Nepo won the game. He played, it was like this. Queen e4, attacking both of these rooks, winning the game, but doesn't matter. This just shows the desperation of black, who was trying to, because he was stretched all over the board, tried to defend all his weaknesses, but it simply didn't work. And eventually, trying desperately to defend all these pawns, he forgot about his rooks. That's it about all these lines, and time to check the Stoneton line with e4. Traditionally, it's been one of the main approaches by black. It's still one of the most common things by black. It's not as popular lately as e takes d4 modern transfer variation, but e4 Stoneton line, I just opted for d3. D3 is such an interesting variation here for you. So let me just show you some of the analysis. And here, the fact that people don't believe anymore in the Stoneton line tells us that the e4 used to be an approach of these guys in the past. Nowadays, everybody plays modern transfer line, and we don't have Nepos games in these lines after e4, d3. So I'm just going to provide some of the analysis that I made here. If e3, if they just tell you, okay, carry on with the game, but I'm not going to give you a pleasure to take or to develop your pieces, bishop f2 is the key move. It stops knight d5, queen h4. It gives you knight f3 without knight d5, harassing your bishop with tempo. And if you play knight d5, you have a beautiful g3 with easy development, knight f3, bishop g2, short castle. But if you play queen d5, queen d2, simply, I don't want to give you any bishop before to pin me. And when I play knight c3, you just have to deal with this queen. And now I play knight e4. What's the point? Believe it or not, endgame like this is preferable for white. Very interesting. According to Holdy's analysis lately, okay, you're up a pawn. You're up a pawn, that's why you're exchanging, but that was an approach in the past. You would always keep the queens at all costs and say, I play the King's Gambit. I'm a King's Gambit player. I gotta finish my game like Paul Morphy. That's not a case anymore. Another thing, apart from e3, is e takes d3. Then you take by queen, defending the pawn. They just say, I want to get the pawn back. You say, be my guest. A couple of games I found after like knight c3, where people played bishop b4, bishop queen b5 check, and you win the piece. So they have to go with those who play bishop d6. Ah, you want a castle? Okay, but I'm up a pawn. And by now, we know that in many of these positions, in the Falkbeer Countergambit, exchanging the queens is anyways preferable for us. So bishop d2, castles, castles. Be my guest if you want to trade the queens. Okay, do it, but under my circumstances, where I'm just going to be able to play a normal game. So here, after like knight bd7, knight f3, queen e2, bishop e2, pawn up, much better game. Easy going game for white. If knight c3, bishop c5, like I want a short castle, I don't want to give you anything on these squares, you just say bishop d2. You don't have to give me anything on these squares because I don't care. I'm up a pawn. I'm defending my pawn on d5, and I'm not even castling short. I'm just going to kill you on the king side afterwards. So it takes d3 would be bad. Queen d5. Queen d5 was traditionally approached, and I found so many games with this line. And that could be a very tempting line by some of these guys who play d5 and play the Stoneton line, and or these older guys who used to analyze some stuff against the King's Gambit, and they knew that the Stoneton line was fine. You play knight c3, they will pin you. You play like this, you want to win the queen. They will have to give it up. And now, let me just show you. They go f6, you go queen e2, you win the pawn, send them home. You're winning. Bishop f5 doesn't work because of g4. And e4 is falling. Knight e7, you win the pawn. See you next time. They can't play knight f6 because you take, once again offering them queens. Here you would win the bishop pair and you're up a pawn and winning. So if when they play queen e4, you offer them queens. Sorry, buddy, but I have the bishop pair. I'm going to be much better. And here, after knight c6, just knight g3. I want to take, I want to play knight e4. I want to play long castle, bishop e5 or bishop c4. What is just so much better. And finally, after bishop c3, they have to go knight e7. Then you take, they take, and you play queen e2. Once again, you send a message, buddy. End games or queenless middle games, that's not a problem for white. It's bishop pair. It's an easy game with an open game for white. So they take, then it's even better because now you have a weak king. We earn this tempo, and my next position would be knight f3, long castle, and white is just better. So just like you see this traditional queen d5 approach that used to be popular and where I found so many games, it doesn't work anymore. Knight f6 you take, and now they take by knight and threatening both queen h4 and bishop c5. Looks terrifying, but only looking like that. You play knight f3, and they play bishop c5, trying to exploit the position of the queen, rook, and the king. And it looks weak. It looks weak, but only for the time being. I'm going to show you something. This is very important to learn the analysis because it looks very tempting to be played by black, and it's extremely bad for them. You play queen e2. You pin the knight, and you want to win the knight with check. So let me show you. I found so many games where people were, they found themselves between, okay, we sacked the pawn, we want to do something against these King's Indian players, but let me just solidify myself first with f5. Well, if you want to solidify yourself, I found so many games where clearly finishing them off this way, bishop e3. Now they don't have anything. They can't touch the pawn because of bishop c5, knight c3. And we're clearly up a pawn. I found so many guys who said, okay, this is a gambit, but from black's point of view, they can't take on e4. Who said that we won't take on e4? Who said that? But rook e8, buddy, your queen and the king are on the same file. Who said that I'm not going to take? What are you talking about, you patzer? And now he goes like, but okay, but what if this? Yes, but now I weakened your king. So bishop d3, going for the mate. g6, boom, knight c3. He's lost. He's dead lost. Not to mention that I'm going to finish him off in the attack. That I'm going to remain the pawn up. Everything is just bad. So we've just seen two bad moves. I found more than 200 games with check and the king looks so weak. Guys, don't worry. It's not bad for us. It's winning for us. Take a look at this one. I found 110 games with queen d5. It's funny. It's sad. But these guys who play this with white pieces, they probably thought something went wrong. Not every one of them. Just like 70% of these guys knew for the knight f2 d2. Knight f2 d2. You win the knight. And you win the bishop. And you win the piece. You're winning in 9 moves. In 9 moves. Lots of guys didn't find that. Bishop f5 doesn't work because of knight c3 as well as f5. So, king d1 f5. Okay, now you want to take. But now it's too late, my friend. Knight f2 d2. I'm threatening the same. I'm threatening the same. I'm taking by c knight. So I can play c3. Harassing this. If you play queen b6, knight c4. So after like queen e3. Boom! Check. That's a point. And if king f8, I'm gonna go for the counter mate and queen d5. You can't stop everything. You're just falling apart. Threatening checkmate queen d8 and doing so many other stuff. And finally, if queen d8, you just play queen g5 and he's just dead lost because I'm just gonna start picking up all his pawns. So who would say that move bishop f2 that looks so tempting, followed by queen d5 loses immediately after this, or that f5 doesn't work because of knight f2 d2 and knight c3? That's what you have to learn. And finally, we've seen why is f5 bad, short castle bad, bishop f2 bad. What about queen e7? Queen e7, we just exchanged the bishops. And you know what? I'm up a pawn. Now, they can play queen b4 because of knight c3 or knight bd2. Castles, knight bd2. I'm challenging your knight and playing long castle. I'm up a pawn, buddy. I'm winning. I found some email games where white won the games even easier. I want to show you one. The guy played knight a6 to defend on c5. Captured. Played knight bd2. We're happy to exchange because we're up a pawn. Played long castle. Played f5. Won on e4. Won the piece and this guy resigned. Meyer against Evans. So many nice games. And that just forces us to conclude that they have to play bishop f5. And position looks okay because they have these three pieces. They all the time have some bishop f2 or knight f2 threats. Yes, buddy, but only if we don't know what are we doing. But we do know what are we doing. So knight c3, threatening to win the piece. They gotta go queen e7. Of course, bishop f2. You just play king d1, and now two pieces are hanging. So queen e7. You just go bishop e3, and now you're solidifying yourself. Why? Because you're up a pawn. So when they play bishop e3, you take. They take, exchange queens. You're up a pawn. But you're not up a pawn, Maya. We take on c2. Okay, but now I have much better development. And now when you go king f8, I go knight e4. I have an open file. I have a knight developed. I'm threatening f5 to win the piece almost immediately. I'm going to play bishop b5 with tempo. When I play, you don't have so many ways to carry on this game. Almost completely winning position for white. If bishop e3, and you decide to say, okay, I'm not going to take because you're dominating there. I'm just going to go with bishop f4. Aha, you want to take advantage of my king. Okay, bishop d4, that's how I'm taking advantage of my bishop e3. Castles this. They go knight c3. You play bishop c3. They take. I'm up a pawn. I don't want to discuss this. I found the game also correspondence game from 2019. White won like this. But okay, what is up a pawn, and this should be easy for white. And finally, they are not supposed to play bishop b4, bishop e3. They go knight e7, similar to knight a6 from that game of Meyer previously. Knight takes c4, bishop c5, long castles, knight g5, knight e4, queen e3, g3. Pawn up, pawns on both sides of the board, bishop better than knight. White easily managed to win this game afterwards. Also correspondence game. And when I say correspondence game, I always want to insist on that word, because when I say correspondence game, that means that both of these guys were either analyzed those positions, they either analyzed these positions, so like in depth, or they were using engines, which means that the quality of the game is very high. And finally, if knight c3, you just take the bishop. They take on e2, you just take the queen. They grab the pawn back, and you play bishop a3. They go knight e5, you go long castles. They go like this. And before I show you another very strong correspondence player, Simmeling, who won this game very soon, I just have to stop here for a moment. We're down a pawn, but we do have a bishop pair. I'm insisting we do have a bishop pair because there always should be enough when you're down a pawn. But what else is important about this position? Better development, inability by black to make castle. Another thing is knight e4 maybe with some tempo, and possibility when you develop the light square bishop to simply go after the exposed king. But very nice move was this one. Problem was that after bishop d3, yes, you can take, but you also can give check, which would involve one more piece into the action, and that's almost undefendable. So after bishop e6, played rook h1, played bishop f5. He now went for getting the pawn back, but not at all costs. But now he goes knight g5. He threatened to go knight f7, but also to go with pawn on e6. After this, played rook e6, threatens on c6. King c7 goes with rook d6. Very lovely move to threaten knight d6 check. Very lovely move, very hard to find. Played bishop f4 when the guy captured, knight e6. And he probably didn't expect this intermediary Zwischenzug, as Germans used to say. c6 is about to fall, rook on d8 is about to fall, and he resigned. Guys, I really hope that you enjoyed the analysis about the King's Gambit today. Thanks to Nepo, it's Jan Nepomniachtchi, one of the best players in the world. Thanks to his course about the King's Gambit, his extensive use of the King's Gambit with white pieces entitled Tuesdays on chess.com, and generally speaking in Blitz and in active time controls, King's Gambit was once again got back into the fashion. Thanks for watching, and once again, if you want to get even deeper, longer, and better analysis, contact me. I'm selling these PGNs. Bye bye.